and it's Damascus, more than any other Arab city, that's been the center of Arab nationalism.
Let us go. So, the Syrian Crisis of 1957 was a period of severe diplomatic confrontations during the Cold War that involved Syria and the Soviet Union on one hand, and the United States and its allies, including Turkey and the Baghdad Pact, on the other. The Baghdad Pact was pretty much just like Middle Eastern NATO, mostly princely states, so that's fun. So now the tension began on the 18th of August when the Syrian government, presided by Sheikh al-Kuwaiti, made a series of provocative institutional changes, such as the appointment of Colonel Afwa al-Bazani as the chief of staff of the Syrian army, who was alleged by the Western governments to be a Soviet sympathizer or simp. Suspicions that a communist takeover had occurred in Damascus grew larger, prompting neighboring Iraq and Jordan and Lebanon to consider supporting an Arab or even a Western military intervention to overthrow the Syrian government. Turkey was the only country to step in by deploying thousands of troops along the Syrian-Turkish border. Nikita Khrushchev threatened that he would launch missiles at Turkey if it attacked Syria, while the United States said that it could attack the Soviet Union in response to an assault on Turkey. The crisis ended in late October when Turkey agreed to cease its border operations following the pressure by the United States, and when Khrushchev made an unexpected visit to the Turkish embassy in Moscow. The events are widely seen as a major failure of the Eisenhower Doctrine, which stressed that the United States could intervene militarily on behalf of the Middle Eastern ally to fight the international communism. Now, this is a quote, I'm paraphrasing, please do not cancel me, but let's go. Time approaching, if indeed not already arrived, when Syria will cease to be effectively an independent nation, but will be taken over as was Czechoslovakia in 1948 and made into a Soviet satellite, having independence only in name and not in substance. We also are convinced that once present groups now in control of Damascus has consolidated its position in Syria, it will reach out in efforts to subvert surrounding countries, thus propagating the communist virus and paving way for control of elements of subversion and subservience to Moscow. Telegram from the U.S. Embassy in Saudi Arabia to the State Department, 1957. Or telegram from the U.S. Embassy in Saudi Arabia in the Telegram from the U.S. Embassy in Saudi Arabia to the State Department. And I try to sound like 1950s, right? The crisis, now let's backtrack a little bit, right? The crisis began in mid-August when the Syrian government made a series of important moves and changes, furthering the idea that communists were in control of Damascus. Such changes include the replacement of Tawfiq Nazim al-Din by Colonel Afwa al-Bazari as the chief of staff of the Syrian army. The latter was suspected by Western governments to be a pro-Soviet fellow traveler or simp. Fellow traveler is basically a person that goes with the flow, kinda like intellectually sympathetic to ideologies and political organizations, and really just goes with the flow. So if there's a communist majority, well, I might be communist now. Kind of a opportunist, political opportunist, but something a bit more. They're kind of a true believer too. But this came 4 days after Syria expelled 3 American diplomats who were accused by Damascus of plotting to overthrow the government. President Dwight D. Eisenhower, Special Envoy to the Middle East, James P. Richards, warned about moving too fast and believed that the tensions could change character and ease off in a few days or weeks. Following Anglo-American talks in response to the incident, U.S. Secretary of State John Foster Dulles described the situation as totally unacceptable and called for further efforts to prevent Syria from becoming a Soviet satellite. He had hoped, though, however, that a violent response to the deployment and the developments would be prevented, though, especially by Israel. On the 21st of August, as advised by Dulles, Eisenhower made unclear statements on the events during a press conference on Syria, without alleging that the Syrian government was communist-controlled. Syria responded with another press conference 2 days later, stating that Damascus was committed to positive neutralism, or positive neutralism, a foreign policy doctrine that stressed independence from the parentalism of the Cold War superpowers. Or basically, you're either my son for the weekend or your mother's son for the weekend. There's no in between, son. And divorce court is very messy and very unjust. But by the end of August, both Washington and London were convinced that Syria was no longer on the non-aligned camp, and that something had to be done in order to prevent the subversion of neighboring countries like Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, and, well, Syria itself. In a letter to those on the 28th of August, British Prime Minister Harold Macmillan described Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev as a more dangerous man even than Stalin, and further stressed the importance of taking action so that neighboring Lebanon, Jordan, and eventually Iraq did not fall under the Soviet sphere of influence, even though all of these countries soon will, or at least accept Soviet aid. So it's kind of funny. The same day, British Ambassador to Jordan, Sir Charles Johnston, said that the Jordanian government was aware of anti-government cells within Syria that it considered arming, but then gave up on the idea and decided to wait for further developments. At the end of the month, Eisenhower sent Lloyd W. Henderson as a special envoy to the Middle East, who was to work out a solution to the crisis by consulting different involved governments, all except the Syrian government. Because they do stuff like complain and talk about sovereign rights and their rights and how they're actually not communists and stuff, but I digress. On the 2nd of September, Secretary Dulles said during a press conference in Washington that all of the countries bordering Syria were of the opinion that Syria would become a communist state if nothing had been done within the next 60 days. This came after Henderson delivered Eisenhower a report from his visit to the Middle East. It was also followed by a series of important diplomatic exchanges between the officials from different countries, during which it was revealed that Israel was willing to take military action, unless other countries neighboring Syria decided to seal off the country, which was discussed at the beginning of September during the meeting in Ankara between the Turkish Prime Minister Adnan Mercedes, Iraqi Crown Prince Abd al-Il, and the American ambassador in Turkey. Israel was eventually pressured by the West to show restraint and not to react. Abd al-Il, or Abd al-Il, or Abd al-Allah? Abd al-Allah? Nah, I don't. Abd al-Al was cautious as he wanted to consult Jordan first before making any moves. A penetration of Syrian territory through Jordan appeared like an easier plan to him than through the Iraqi-Syrian border. Turkey, however, was willing to adopt military measures since it viewed the situation as a matter of national security, and it was the only country to actually deploy troops, and that's how we get the nukes in Turkey and stuff like that, and that's how we actually get to the Cuban Missile Crisis. Yep, it is just like that. History is not a vacuum, but many things and many moving parts in history have made the history that we are living in today. But anyway, I digress, and hopefully everybody learned something. I hope you enjoyed. And until next time, remember, do not be a simp for any nation. Be your own way, be non-aligned, and most importantly, be anti-colonial and be based, and blue-pilled. Anyway, hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. And until next time, learn something. And do we say Allahu Akbar? Well, I already said so. Allahu Akbar! I learned something, of course. It's been a while since we did a Islamic majority or Islamic kind of stuff. That had proper respects to say that, you know what I'm saying? Allahu Akbar during the Lebanon. Anyway, learn something, and I'll see you next time, and I hope you enjoyed. And yeah,